And now to talk about further detail on our recommendations, first Senator Yudichak.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Just want to acknowledge that Senator Kucinich, our caucus chair, also joined us today. We're talking about the subject of disclosure. So for full disclosure, I have to tell you that I am a Penn Stater. Graduated from Penn State. My wife graduated from Penn State. My brother-in-law graduated from Penn State. And his wife graduated from Penn State. So when you hear the phrase, "we are Penn State," to my family, like many Pennsylvania families, that's not just a slogan at a football game. That's a way of life. So I have taken great personal offense hearing some comments from the members of the boards, few members of the Board of Trustees, that have suggested that the General Assembly's action to look at board governance, that criticism from alumni groups is somehow, that criticism is being disloyal to the university or disparaging the university. That could not be further from the truth. Higher education, especially public higher education, should always be willing to examine its mission and its commitment to its stakeholders. And so what we are talking about here today is not the appropriations for Penn State. Senate Democrats have historically been staunch advocates of funding Penn State University at higher levels. We have been strenuous in our opposition to funding cuts to higher education, particularly to Penn State. And we have universally recognized that Penn State is a world-class university. There's no question about that. It has impacted millions of lives in Pennsylvania, including my own, in terms of our experience at Penn State and our education at Penn State. But Penn State University is one of the best economic assets this Commonwealth has ever known in terms of its ability to attract investment, research, and development and generate jobs. The conversation really boils down to whether or not, in the aftermath of the Sandusky scandal, the governance structure of Penn State, whether or not that governance structure added to or compounded the challenges that the university now faces in the aftermath of the Sandusky scandal, which now stands at about $48 million in terms of its cost to the university and counting. So board governance is an important subject for the General Assembly to talk about. As Senator Teplitz mentioned, we were there, General Assembly was there in 1855 when Penn State University was created. And we've been great partners together in advancing the mission of our public land-grant university. So we need to be part of the conversation about governance. I want to commend Senator Smucker, the chairman of the State Government Committee. We've had 2 hearings, one on board governance, one on the right-to-know legislation. They were very thoughtful discussions, and we appreciate Senator Smucker advancing those hearings. I appreciate that the Board of Trustees at Penn State also recognizes that there's a governance structure issue. Otherwise, they would not have created a governance committee and made recommendations. Unfortunately, the recommendations and the actions of the board are at best lukewarm attempts at meaningful reform. I think former Auditor General Jack Wagner said it best when he said it is impossible for the Penn State Board of Trustees to independently and comprehensively restructure itself. The General Assembly needs to play a role. The General Assembly needs to have a voice. And I think we're focusing on, and Senator Denneman will go into greater detail, on the points that we believe need to be addressed by the General Assembly. One, the composition of the board. There was an action taken in the early 2000s that changed the way the business and industry members of the board were selected. They used to be elected, like many of the other constituencies on the board, whether that's the alumni base or the agricultural communities, but that was changed by an action of the board, not an action of the General Assembly. And the Board of Trustees, those members that come from the business and industry component, are now selected by the board themselves, rather than a partnership with the General Assembly. We believe that needs to be addressed, the composition of the board, the size of the board. The governor has already said he will step down and become an ex officio member. As Senator Teplitz mentioned, we believe that needs to be done in statute, but we should also look at the other appointments by the governor. The governor has 10, what amounts to 10 votes on that board. Secretaries of Agriculture, Education, and DCNR. I would argue that they should also be ex officio members, not voting members of the board. That gets the board down to a manageable level where you could not have power ceded to the administration, where you will have an active and engaged board of trustees. And I think that's important in our public universities. And we are also going to talk about adding Penn State and the state-related universities to the Right to Know Act and the Ethics Act. And Senator Denneman will go into greater detail. But I think the final point that I want to make about the great University of Penn State is that the Board of Trustees cannot weave back and forth between a private mindset when it does not want to talk about transparency and accountability, and then weave back to a public mindset when they want the support of taxpayer-funded dollars. They can't weave back and forth between a private mindset and a public mindset. It is, in my mind, as a Penn Stater, one of the best, if not the best, land-grant institutions in the world. It needs to be a public institution. And Penn Staters, whether they're students or alumni, whether they're faculty, they deserve the full confidence, to have full confidence in the Board of Trustees that they are a public institution. And the taxpayers of Pennsylvania demand accountability and transparency for their state support. Auditor General Wagner, in his report, made that statement. I reinforced it today, that it is impossible to think that whether it's the Penn State or any board of this nature is simply going to be able to restructure itself. We believe on the statutory level that they don't have that authority. Think of the complexity and confusion that would be created by a new governor coming in and saying, I believe I'm on that board, no matter what that Board of Trustees passed in some governance committee. Statutory authority puts me on that board. And now you have a conflict between the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and Penn State University. Yes, these are complicated matters, but we need to get it right. We need to heal Penn State University. It is a house divided at the moment, and I think the only way that you bring the Penn State family and the Penn State community back together if there is a full commitment to accountability and transparency. And that needs the full engagement of the governor and the General Assembly. We need to play a role in oversight and governance and the structure of that board, particularly the Board of Trustees, so that we can restore confidence that Penn State University is going to continue to be a world-class university.